eyes and tried hard to control her emotions. Mom, I'm really busy right now. Try to make your tone calm and almost indifferent. There's a project at school and I have to participate. But, Mom, I'm hanging up first. Lin Xingyi interrupted. Let's talk about it when we have time. After hanging up the phone, Lin Xingyi seemed exhausted. She slumped on the bed, feeling as if all her strength had been drained out of her. She knew she didn't want to go back to that home, but no one had ever confirmed her thoughts before. I remembered what Chen Yang said: if you are hesitant about whether to go home, then don't go back. Thinking of Chen Yang, whom she hadn't seen for many days, and thinking of home, Lin Xingyi's eyes unconsciously fell on her phone again. My father usually doesn't care about me. The most recent news I received was a transfer record of 10,000 yuan more than 10 days ago. Lin Xingyi looked at the bank transfer notification text message on her mobile phone and smiled bitterly. I have to learn to live on my own. Lin Xingyi made up her mind silently, recalling the last time she went to the vegetable market with Chen Yang. Lin Xingyi decided to start by buying vegetables and cooking by herself. I changed my clothes, clenched my fist to cheer myself up, and opened the door. Not far out of the community, when I stood at the entrance of the busy vegetable market, that familiar feeling of uneasiness came over me again. The noise of the crowd, the shouts of the vendors, everything made her feel overwhelmed. Lin Xingyi's clenched palms began to sweat. She had nowhere to put her hands and could only pinch the corners of her clothes. Her breathing became rapid. No, I can't do that, the girl murmured to herself and turned away in disappointment. After returning home, Lin Xingyi sat on the sofa, her eyes misted over, her nose slightly red, and she felt frustrated. Chapter 71 Tangled. But Lin Xingyi did not give up and turned on her cell phone. Buying groceries online is also an option. Lin Xingyi comforted herself. Unconsciously, Lin Xingyi has actually made progress in dealing with her emotions. She can now vent her emotions a little instead of letting them sink in. The fresh food delivery in Linjiang City is quite developed. It is said that the food can be delivered within 30 minutes. Soon, the fresh vegetables and meat were delivered. Lin Xingyi stood in the kitchen, holding a kitchen knife in her hand, feeling a little at a loss. Opened the video website and searched for a simple braised pork tutorial. Remembering what Chen Yang said last time, I'll teach you how to process meat next time. Lin Xingyi wanted to try it first. First, cut the meat into small pieces, the blogger in the video said. Lin Xingyi operated very carefully, fearing that she would cut her fingers. The cuts of meat were all different sizes and looked a bit funny. Then fry the meat in a pan until golden. Lin Xingyi did as she was told. But soon the kitchen was filled with choking smoke. I opened the window in a panic, and through my tearful eyes I saw that the meat in the pot had turned burnt black. It's okay, try again. Lin Xingyi didn't expect to succeed in one go, so she wasn't too disappointed. She silently encouraged herself. I'll succeed eventually. I was busy in the kitchen for a while. Some dishes were burnt, but some were unexpectedly edible, so it was considered a success. The process is difficult, but when I see the dishes I made with my own hands, I still feel a positive feeling in my heart. Thinking of what Chen Yang told her last time, that doing things by herself was more meaningful, Lin Xingyi felt that this must be a sense of accomplishment. It would be nice if I could share it with Chen Yang. Lin Xingyi looked at the dishes of varying quality on the table. After picking up the phone and hesitating for a moment, he sent a message to Chen Yang. I cooked today. There are 2 pictures below, which are some of the more successful dishes. After sending the message, Lin Xingyi's mouth corners unconsciously raised, and she wanted Chen Yang to praise her. 17 days ago, in the core business district of Linjiang City, there is a street named Heaven on Earth. It includes 5-star hotels, KTVs, bars and private clubs, etc., all inclusive of food, drink, entertainment and accommodation. Inside the 68-story Riverside Hotel of Paradise on Earth, a man stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the brilliant lights of the entire city. The Longdian River forks in the field of vision. The branch Jiajiang goes north, turns east and then south, and flows back to the Longdian River in the distant sight, forming a mouth shape. It was past 11 and approaching midnight. The night scene of Linjiang City spread out at Lin Xingyi's feet. The lights were like scattered diamonds, outlining the contours of the city. In his right hand he'd whirled a crystal goblet filled with deep red wine. Under the soft light of the floor lamp, the wine reflects a charming luster, as if it contains endless stories. Lin Xingyi took a sip of the red wine, letting the mellow taste bloom on his tongue. He could taste the grapes, oak and subtle vanilla. These complex flavors seemed to reflect his complex emotions at the moment. Drop. The timer alarm was set, the phone screen lit up, and the displayed time jumped to 0. August 1st. A new day also marks the beginning of a new month. Lin Xingyi put down his wine glass, picked up his mobile phone, opened the bank account skillfully, and moved his fingers across the screen, easily completing a transfer. 10,000 yuan of living expenses per month was transferred to Lin Xingyi. The moment the transfer was completed, Lin Xingyi felt a corner of his heart seem to be relieved. Lin Xingyi becomes nervous at the end of every month. This is what he does every month, as if it can make up for something. Another month has passed. He murmured to himself, has uncle fulfilled his responsibilities? At this moment, A pair of hands with brightly painted nails quietly climbed onto Lin Xiyui's shoulders. And an enchanting figure clung to him, breathing sweetly. Honey, are you still working so late? Lin Xiyui glanced at the girl next to him. She was wearing a thin silk nightgown, and her faintly visible curves looked alluring in the dim light. However, these beautiful scenery did not arouse Lin Xiyui's interest at all. The girl followed Lin Xiyui's gaze and saw the transfer interface on his phone. She asked coquettously, "Oh, who should I send money to at this late hour? Could it be that old woman?" There was a hint of jealousy in her voice. Yet it was also flattering. The old woman naturally refers to Lin Xiyui's wife. Lin Xiyui frowned slightly, a little impatient. "Don't worry about work." The girl refused to give in, and her slender fingers gently stroked Lin Xiyui's shoulder. "Don't be so standoffish. Do you want someone to help you relax?" Lin Xiyui was feeling depressed. He stood up suddenly and pushed him away almost rudely. "I said, mind your own business." There was unquestionable authority in his voice. The girl was startled by the sudden coldness. She shrank into a corner of the sofa in grievance, not daring to say another word. Lin Xiyui glanced at her, and now had no desire to get close to her. His thoughts had already drifted far away. Brother, Lin Xiyui silently thought in his heart. What should I do to fulfill my promise? Memories came flooding back. The promise he made to his elder brother Lin Xiyui 19 years ago when he was dying was still ringing in his ears. Like a sharp knife, engraved on his conscience. Lin Xiyui took another big sip of red wine, trying to numb the torment in his heart with alcohol. Should I really give half of the company shares to my niece? Can she manage it? Before Lin Xiyui died, he only had time to leave behind part of his will related to the transfer of the company's ownership. He passed away before he could mention other matters such as guardianship. Lin Xiyui smiled self-deprecating like he really hoped that his elder brother could live a few more minutes and leave a complete will. At least I don't have to worry about it anymore. Outside the window, the night sky of Linzhong City becomes increasingly darker. In the distance on the river, a cruise ship was slowly passing by, and the lights on the boat drew a long golden streak on the water. Lin Xiyui stood up and walked to the French window. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass and closed his eyes, experiencing a fierce struggle in his heart in the silence. Chapter 72 Irresistible Thoughts. Time goes back to the present. A few days later, Lin Xingyi was flipping through her sketchbook in the rental house, recalling what Chen Yang had done with her. The cicadas outside the window chirped one after another, telling of the heat of midsummer, and the girl's inner restlessness. Feeling a little annoyed, Lin Xingyi came to the windowsill, holding a small pair of gardening shears in her hand. But her eyes were a little out of focus. Her eyes fell on the green plant that Chen Yang gave her. The leaves swayed gently in the breeze, as if waving to her. "Chen Yang." Lin Xingyi whispered softly, her slender fingers gently stroking a green leaf. Chen Yang brought this plant one day, saying that she wanted to add some vitality to her nest. Thinking of Chen Yang, Lin Xingyi felt a pang of bitterness in her heart. "I haven't seen him for 21 days. He seems to be very busy recently and rarely replies to my messages. Does it mean he no longer cares about me?" This thought was like a sharp blade, piercing into Lin Xingyi's heart. Her eyes suddenly became sharp, and the scissors in her hand mercilessly cut towards an innocent green leaf that should not have been trimmed. With a click, a neat cut appeared, a little transparent juice seeped out, and the leaf fell to the ground. Looking at the green leaf lying alone on the ground, Lin Xingyi woke up as if from a dream. Regret came like almost drowning her. "What am I doing?" she murmured to herself, her voice trembling a little, and squatted down in panic, wanting to pick up the leaf but didn't know what to do. Finally, she could only weakly put down the scissors and fell onto the soft sofa. His eyes fell on the stuffed bear that always stayed on the sofa next to him, and he couldn't help but reach out and hug it in his arms. "You are telling me to ignore me, you are telling me to ignore me," Lin Xingyi muttered, punching the teddy bear's belly with her pink fist. Her brows furrowed, the corners of her mouth drooping slightly, and she looked like she was in a bad mood. The thought of sending a message and making a phone call flashed through in Xingyi's mind again. She couldn't wait to grab the phone and open the chat interface with Chen Yang. On the interface, the last message was from 4 days ago, when Chen Yang praised her for her great cooking. My fingers wandered over the keyboard, wanting to type something but not knowing where to start. "Never mind." Lin Xingyi sighed and threw her phone aside. The next second an inexplicable anger surged up again. Lin Xingyi suddenly raised her bare foot and stomped hard on the mobile phone on the sofa. The little feet are white with a hint of pink, and the toes are slightly curled up due to the force. "You're telling me to ignore me." Lin Xingyi stepped on it several times in a row, muttering softly as she did so, but there was a hint of grievance in her voice. After venting, Lin Xingyi sat there panting. He looked down at his masterpiece and felt regretful again. He quickly picked up the phone and wiped it carefully with a few alcohol pads. "I'm sorry," Lin Xingyi said softly, with a hint of apology in her tone. "I didn't mean it. No, we can't go on like this." Lin Xingyi glanced at the calendar. It was very close to the start of school and she would be able to see Chen Yang as soon as school started. But Lin Xingyi wants to find Chen Yang tonight. At the same time, in Chen Yang's room, there was a slight aroma of instant coffee floating in the air. Chen Yang stared at the computer screen, his fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard, as if he was racing against time. We have reached the last step. That's it. Chen Yang muttered to himself, even though the air conditioner was on. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. In order to make the anti-multi-device detection solution more stable and covert, Chen Yang decided to integrate it directly into the network adapter's firmware. He chose the OpenWRT-based router in front of him as the experimental platform. Last step flashed the firmware to the router. Chen Yang was stunned for a second, seemingly not reacting yet. Suddenly he jumped up from his chair, raised his hands above his head, and shouted, "I did it!" There was irrepressible excitement in his voice, and his whole body seemed to be injected with endless energy. Chen Yang started dancing around the room since there was no one else around. He didn't care how funny he looked. Ha 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 ha. Now I'm just waiting for school to start and then I'll try the campus network. After the excitement, Chen Yang slumped in his chair and let out a long sigh. He reached out and touched his chin, only then noticing that he had grown a circle of stubble. The self in the small mirror looked a little sloppy, and his hair slightly covered his eyebrows. Well, it's time to clean myself up, Chen Yang said to himself. Why does it seem so handsome like this? The first thing to do after finishing all this is to find Lin Xingyi. Chen Yang picked up the mobile phone next to him, glanced at the desk calendar, it had not been turned for a long time, opened the calendar on his phone and calibrated it. At this sight, his smile froze and he was shocked in his heart. On the mobile phone calendar, the day before school starts is circled in red. WC makeup exam. Chen Yang slapped his forehead and said in annoyance. He thought of the physics course he had failed in college and suddenly felt tired. During this period of time, I devoted myself to the research of routers, sometimes staying up for several nights in a row. Now that it's finally done, I feel a wave of fatigue coming over me. After completing a big task, I feel so exhausted that I don't have the energy or mood to do anything else. Call. Chen Yang sighed deeply and leaned back in his chair. Now he just wanted to have a good sleep, empty his mind and think about nothing. However, the red circle seemed to have magic and kept appearing in his mind. Chen Yang frowned, feeling anxious. I haven't read a book for a whole holiday, and I almost forgot all the physics formulas. He murmured to himself, with a helpless tone, what should I do now? Chen Yang scratched his long hair and let out a frustrated cry. Why do things always happen so fast? Linjiang University is among the top 3 schools with the lowest failure rate. The makeup exam is a little more difficult than usual. Without the bonus of normal scores, the questions will be more difficult. If you fail the makeup exam, you will have to retake it. This repair is like a debuff that causes continuous blood loss, which keeps bothering you and makes you feel uneasy. Chen Yang glanced at the thick physics textbook on the desk and his expression became complicated. This is the fact and we have to accept it. Chen Yang took a deep breath and revealed a helpless yet determined smile. Well, now that I've chosen this path, I'll go all the way to the end, he said to himself. I, Chen Yang, have seen all kinds of storms and waves. This little thing is nothing. On the other side of the city, Lin Xingyi, who had made up her mind to find Xing Yang tonight, was experiencing a fierce struggle in her heart. She stood in front of the mirror, clasped her hands, and stared at herself in the mirror. Come on, Lin Xingyi whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly but full of determination. When she thought about seeing Xing Yang tonight, no. Later, Lin Xingyi's heart beat so fast that it seemed like it was going to jump out of her chest. No matter if he is busy or not, Lin Xingyi murmured to herself, with a hint of stubbornness in her eyes. I just want to go find him. Chapter 73 I'm coming to you. After making up her mind, Lin Xingyi's actions became decisive. I opened the closet, hesitated for a moment and finally chose a light blue dress. This is what Chen Yang once said was beautiful, although Chen Yang didn't say any of them were ugly. She changed into a skirt and fixed her hair in front of the floor-length mirror. She ran her fingers through her smooth hair and combed it twice, trembling slightly. This should be okay, right? She asked herself quietly, a faint blush appearing on her face due to nervousness. There is still some time before the evening rush hour, so now is the best time to set off. She gently took off her indoor slippers, revealing her fair and slender ankles, bent down, and gently put on a pair of pure white ankle socks. The soft fabric caressed her skin, and the socks felt a little cool, because they had been in the air-conditioned room for too long. Then she took out a pair of light blue canvas shoes that she liked. Okay, she checked her outfit in the mirror and took a deep breath. Set off. Lin Xingyi walked out of the room quietly, and the moment she locked the door, she felt her heartbeat so loud. It was getting dark late in the summer, and just as dusk was about to gradually cover the city, the number of people on the streets began to increase. Lin Xingyi lowered her head and walked quickly towards the nearby subway station. I held the straps of my backpack tightly, as if this could give me more courage. Line 2, Line 2. Lin Xingyi muttered to herself, recalling some of the landmark buildings that she happened to see when Xing Yang took her to his house that day. Because I was sad at the time, my memory seemed to be covered with a veil, blurry yet clear. The moment I entered the subway station, the unfamiliar environment, unfamiliar people, and the familiar feeling of uneasiness came over me again. Lin Xingyi looked around subconsciously. Fortunately, it was not rush hour yet, and there were not many people in the station. I walked quickly towards the platform, my heartbeat quickening as the subway roared closer. The moment the car door opened, Lin Xingyi almost jumped in. There were only a few people in the carriage. Lin Xingyi breathed a sigh of relief, looked around quickly, and finally chose a corner seat. She sat down carefully, hugged the backpack tightly in her arms, and held on to this only support. With her head lowered, her long hair fell down, hiding her slightly flushed cheeks, and narrowing her vision. The train started slowly, and Lin Xingyi's heart trembled. I looked up through the car window at the scenery that was rapidly receding, and kept thinking, Chen Yang, wait for me this time. It's my turn to find you. More than 30 minutes later, the mechanical female voice announcing the station woke Lin Xingyi from her thoughts. After getting out of the subway and standing at the exit of the subway station, Lin Xingyi felt confused. The noisy streets, the hurried pedestrians, the constant honking of vehicles, everything made her feel overwhelmed. My heartbeat quickened and my palms began to sweat. Where should I go? Lin Xingyi muttered to herself, with a hint of panic in her eyes. I tried hard to recall the last time I came here with Chen Yang, but my memory was like an overturned color palette, becoming a mess. It should be around here, but the exact location. I took out my phone and wanted to ask Chen Yang, but I couldn't find a reason. Lin Xingyi bit her lower lip, forced herself to calm down, and scanned the surroundings. Finally her eyes fell on a bus stop not far away. Oh, by the way, take a taxi. This idea was like a life-saving straw, making Lin Xingyi feel slightly relieved. She walked carefully to the platform and hailed a taxi on the roadside. A yellow taxi slowly stopped in front of her. Master, Lin Xingyi spoke with a tremor in her voice. Can you please take me to? My brain suddenly got stuck. What was the address of Chen Yang's house? Lin Xingyi's brain was working fast when Chen Yang took her home. They took a taxi. She tried to find the key name from the fragments of her memory. Anping community. Lin Xingyi finally remembered and spoke hurriedly. The taxi driver was a middle-aged man. He turned his head and smiled kindly. Little girl, did you remember it wrong? There is an Anping garden nearby. Lin Xingyi was stunned for a moment, then suddenly realized. Yes. She nodded hurriedly, her cheeks slightly flushed with nervousness. It's Anping garden. The driver said with a smile. It's okay, get in the car. Lin Xingyi sat in the back seat and hugged the backpack tightly in her arms again. The car started slowly, but her heart beat faster and faster. On the way, Lin Xingyi's mind kept flashing through various news reports she had seen. Taxi drivers kidnapped passengers were robbed and raped. These horrific scenes made her shrink involuntarily. The security is pretty good now. I don't think so. Little girl. The driver's voice interrupted Lin Xingyi's wild thoughts. Is this your first time in Linjiang? Oh, I go to college here. Lin Xingyi gave an ambiguous answer without saying much. She twisted her fingers together unconsciously and prayed silently in her heart that she would reach her destination quickly. Finally, the car stopped at the gate of a grand, but somewhat old residential area. The big words Anping garden are eye-catching. Here we are, said the driver. The total is 35 yuan. Although it didn't seem like she had been sitting there for long, Lin Xingyi didn't care about the money. She just thought that she had finally found a place. I scanned the code to pay and got off the car in a hurry. Standing at the gate of the community, Lin Xingyi looked inside the community. Chen Yang, where are you? Night has quietly fallen, and the street lights inside the community and on the streets outside are lighting up one after another. Lin Xingyi stood at the door, feeling both expectant and anxious. I took a deep breath and walked into this, somewhat familiar neighborhood. The community is shaded by green trees, and the light from the street lamps casts mottled shadows among the leaves, adding a touch of magic to this summer night. Turn left. Or right? Lin Xingyi stood at the fork in the road, hesitant. I closed my eyes and tried hard to recall the path I walked with Chen Yang that day. It seems to be turning right? She turned right hesitantly, afraid of taking a wrong step. Every time she passed a building, Lin Xingyi would carefully look at the building number. Building no. 1, building no. 2. Lin Xingyi whispered. Building no. 3. Seeing the familiar building number, and even the trees next to it were so familiar, Lin Xingyi's heart skipped a beat. Do you want to send a message to Chen Yang, telling him I'm downstairs? Lin Xingyi took out her cell phone and her finger hovered over the screen. But soon, she shook her head again. No, what if he asks me what I'm doing here? How should I answer? Thinking of this, Lin Xingyi clenched her fists. Just go straight up. Chapter 70 for Don't Close the Door. Walking into the first floor and standing in front of the elevator, Lin Xingyi pressed the up button with trembling fingers. The elevator arrived with a ding and she walked in quickly. Is it the 7th floor? Lin Xingyi murmured to herself, her eyes wandering over the floor. But she closed her eyes and tried hard to recall the day when she took the elevator with Chen Yang. Yes, it's the 7th floor. The elevator slowly rose, and Lin Xingyi felt her heartbeat so loud that it seemed like it was about to burst through her chest. What if I remember it wrong? She thought anxiously. If I press the wrong floor, how should I explain it to strangers? The elevator stopped at the 7th floor. Lin Xingyi walked out of the elevator. The corridor was eerily quiet, with only her footsteps echoing. Left, right. Lin Xingyi muttered softly, her eyes searching for familiar sights until her gaze fixed on a door with a familiar shoe rack at the door. Here it is. Lin Xingyi's heart beat faster as she recognized the shoe rack she had seen before. There is only one door between me and the person I want to see. Standing in front of the door, Lin Xingyi felt her courage disappearing little by little. She raised her hand in the air, unable to press the doorbell. What am I doing? Lin Xingyi asked herself in her heart. Would it be too presumptuous to suddenly show up at Chen Yang's door like this? But thinking of her inner anxiety and longing, Lin Xingyi gritted her teeth. No matter what, now that we are here, we can't back down. She closed her eyes, as if she had made up her mind, and gently pressed the doorbell. Ding dong. The crisp sound of the doorbell echoed in the silent corridor, as if it also startled Lin Xingyi's nervous heartstring, and beads of sweat appeared on her palms. Was it Chen Yang who opened the door? Or his parents? Lin Xingyi thought nervously. What should I say? How should I explain it? All kinds of thoughts filled Lin Xingyi's mind. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. Lin Xingyi held her breath and pricked up her ears to listen to the movement inside the door. Every second seemed as long as a century. Slowly, footsteps were heard behind the door. Lin Xingyi felt that her heartbeat was so loud that even the person behind the door could hear it. She nervously grabbed the corner of her clothes and tried to stay calm. When she heard the sound of the door lock turning, Lin Xingyi subconsciously took a half step back, staring at the door handle, both expecting and fearing the person who was about to appear in front of her. The door slowly opened. The moment the door was fully opened, Lin Xingyi's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. The person standing behind the door was not Chen Yang, but a gentle and dignified middle-aged woman. Lin Xingyi recognized that this was Chen Yang's mother. Lin Xingyi felt panicked for a moment. Her hands twisted together subconsciously, and her eyes flickered. Hello, Ansai." Her voice was as thin as a mosquito's, and it got smaller and smaller as she spoke. I'm here to find Chen Yang." After saying this, she almost wanted to shrink herself into a small dot and hide. Li Huowan was a little confused at first, but she quickly recognized the shy girl. "Oh, you are." Her eyes widened slightly, and the image of the girl her son brought home last time appeared in her mind. This kid actually came to me on his own. Li Huowan thought to herself. It seems that Yan Yang and her have a special relationship. Her eyes softened and the corners of her mouth unconsciously raised. "Is that Xingyi? Come in quickly, don't stand outside," Li Huowan said enthusiastically, with a hint of inexplicable joy in her tone. Lin Xingyi felt as if she had been pardoned, and she stepped over the threshold tentatively and carefully, looking at Li Huowan, fearing that she would not be allowed in. "Come on, change into a pair of slippers." Li Huowan took out a pair of pink slippers from the shoe cabinet and handed them to Lin Xingyi. Lin Xingyi took the slippers, bent down, and slowly took off her shoes. It seemed as if she had no strength left. Her fingers trembled slightly, and she finally put on the slippers with great difficulty. When she stood up straight, Lin Xingyi's eyes unconsciously scanned the room, as if looking for a figure. Li Huowan keenly caught Lin Xingyi's eyes. "Yan Yang is in the room upstairs. This child, I don't know what he's doing all day. And he doesn't even know how to come down and accompany his mother." When she heard Chen Yang's name, Lin Xingyi's heart beat faster. She didn't dare look directly into Li Huowan's eyes, for fear that her inner turmoil would be seen. Come, I'll take you up." Li Huowan naturally knew that the other party did not come to her house to eat for free, so she said gently and led the little girl upstairs. Lin Xingyi followed Li Huowan up the stairs. Her heart beat faster with every step she took. This child? Li Huowan walked in thought. She looks quiet and gentle. And she and Yan Yang are a good match. I wonder where they are now? Yan Yang is the same. He has a girlfriend but he won't admit it. Soon they arrived at Chen Yang's door. Lin Xingyi's heart was beating so fast that it seemed like it was going to jump out of her chest. He nervously grasped the corner of his clothes and stared at the door. Li Huowan knocked on the door gently. "Yan Yang, open the door." There was a rustling sound in the house. Inside the room, Chen Yang was sitting at the desk, staring at the computer in a daze. The university physics textbooks, spread out on the table, seemed to be silently mocking him. He glanced at his cell phone inadvertently, wanting to send a message to Lin Xingyi. "Since I can't continue studying for the time being, I might as well fly freely." Just as he was struggling, there was a knock on the door. "Yan Yang, open the door." My mother's voice came from outside the door. Chen Yang was stunned for a moment. "What's wrong, Mom?" He stood up and walked quickly towards the door. Usually, his mother would come to bring him some fruit, or remind him to drink some water. As soon as the door opened, Chen Yang's eyes widened instantly. Behind the mother stood a familiar figure. Lin Xingyi was wearing a light blue dress with her long hair hanging softly on her shoulders. Under the light of the corridor, her face looked particularly soft, with a hint of uneasiness and expectation in her eyes. Chen Yang felt his heart skip a beat. "Xingyi, why are you?" Li Huowan looked at her son's expression. Okay. Go ahead and chat, and remember to keep the door open." After saying that, she turned and went downstairs to continue cooking, leaving the two young men looking at each other in bewilderment. Chen Yang reached out and gently grabbed Lin Xingyi's wrist and pulled her into the room. "Why are you here?" There was a hint of undisguised joy in Chen Yang's voice. Lin Xingyi's skirts swayed gently with her movements. Like a blue wave in summer, her wrist was held by Chen Yang, and the familiar touch made her heart beat faster. Li Huowan had just walked a short distance when Chen Yang closed the door with his backhand, making a slight click sound. "Of course you have the final say in your own room." Chapter 75. I'll help you review. The room was filled with a faint scent of sunshine. The quilt, at Li Huowan had just taken out to dry in the sun, and the scent of books. There were several unknown posters on the wall and various papers and pens scattered on the desk. However, when Lin Xingyi finally raised her head and met Chen Yang's gaze, the longing and grievances that had accumulated in her heart for many days surged in like a flood. The girl lowered her head again, the corners of her eyes turned slightly red, and her eyelashes trembled slightly, as if she was trying hard to restrain something. Xingyi? Chen Yang noticed her strangeness and expressed his concern in his voice. What's wrong? Lin Xingyi remained silent, but her tightly bitten lower lip and slightly trembling shoulders silently revealed the turmoil in her heart. A brief silence spread between the two of them, like a thin veil that both separated and connected their hearts. Lin Xingyi lowered her head, her long hair falling like a waterfall, covering her slightly trembling lips. When he raised his head again, his eyes were filled with tears, like to clear lakes. His voice was as soft as a mosquito's hum, but it carried a grievance that could not be ignored. If I don't come to you, you will ignore me. These words were like a small knife, gently stabbing Chen Yang's heart. In fact, he would always reply to Lin Xingyi's messages. Maybe Chen Yang had his own things to do during the summer vacation, which was a huge difference from before. Chen Yang looked at Lin Xingyi's delicate eyes, tears flickering under the light, ready to overflow at any time. Her eyelashes trembling slightly, like the fragile wings of a butterfly. Chen Yang panicked immediately and frantically pulled out a tissue from the desk. Don't cry, don't cry. He held a tissue in his hand and wanted to wipe away Lin Xingyi's tears. However, Lin Xingyi turned her head away stubbornly, not allowing Chen Yang to touch her. Her profile, tinted pink by the excitement, looked particularly gentle, yet with a hint of stubbornness. And her slightly pouting lips told of her inner dissatisfaction. Chen Yang looked at the stubborn girl in front of him. Feeling helpless and a little distressed, he put down the tissue and sighed softly. Then, as if he had made up his mind, he stretched out his arms and embraced Lin Xingyi. Lin Xingyi was stunned by this unexpected hug. The originally tense body slowly relaxed in Chen Yang's warm embrace, like a budding flower that finally bloomed in the sun. She was stunned for a moment, then her arms unconsciously wrapped around Chen Yang's waist. Her cheek pressed against his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat. I'm sorry, Xingyi. Chen Yang's voice was not as usual, serious and gentle. I was wrong. Chen Yang didn't know where he went wrong, but he could probably guess it. He patted Lin Xingyi's back gently and continued to explain. I've actually been researching that thing. I wanted to bring it to your rental house like last time, so I can be with you. At this point, Chen Yang's voice suddenly became a little unnatural. His ears turned slightly red, and now he had to be more sincere. But I can't concentrate when you're around me. Lin Xingyi raised her head and met Chen Yang's slightly embarrassed eyes. Seeing Lin Xingyi's gradually calming expression, Chen Yang quickly added. So I thought, why not fix it right away at home? That way I can come to see you sooner. His tone was full of apology. After listening to Chen Yang's explanation, Lin Xingyi felt that the grievance in her heart melted like ice and snow. It was not intentional. His eyes softened and his voice became softer. Okay, then, I forgive you. When Chen Yang heard this, he seemed relieved. After listening to Chen Yang's explanation, Lin Xingyi felt that Chen Yang cared a lot about that thing. She bit her tender lower lip lightly, and couldn't help asking questions. Lin Xingyi's voice was gentle, with a hint of hesitation. Is it done now? Chen Yang's eyes suddenly lit up, as if stars were twinkling. Yeah, it's done. He said this excitedly, like a child showing off his favorite toy. Lin Xingyi was also somewhat happy for Chen Yang, but she also felt a little dissatisfied. She curled her lips slightly, and her tone suddenly became a little sharp. Then why didn't you come to me after you finished it? Chen Yang was startled by this sudden question. An embarrassed expression appeared on his face, and he was thinking about his words. Well, actually, I was just looking for you when you arrived home. His voice became smaller and smaller, his attitude sincere. Besides, I have to retake a failed course, and school is about to start. Speaking of the makeup exam, Chen Yang's expression became a little ashamed, and his eyes were evasive, like a child who had done something wrong. Chen Yang explained so much, mostly to make Lin Xingyi think it through, fearing that she was feeling depressed. Lin Xingyi looked at Chen Yang's embarrassed expression, and her dissatisfaction instantly disappeared. She said him softly, which meant she accepted the explanation. When Lin Xingyi heard about the makeup exam, her curiosity was aroused. She walked lightly to Chen Yang's desk and gently opened the university physics textbook on the table with her slender white fingers. The pages of the book are so clean that there are almost no signs of being turned, silently telling how diligent its owner is. College physics is something that almost all students of science and engineering have to study, and Lin Xingyi is very familiar with this textbook, but her grades have always been among the best with an enviable GPA, and the term makeup exam has nothing to do with her. Lin Xingyi turned around, a hint of excitement flashing in her eyes. How about, I can help you review? There was a hint of anticipation and caution in her voice. Chen Yang was a little stunned. He had never thought about this before. He looked into Lin Xingyi's eyes, those beautiful eyes that had just been filled with tears, and did not dare to refuse. The light shines through the girl's eyelashes, casting a layer of golden halo, which is so beautiful that it makes people intoxicated. Chen Yang could only nod slightly. Oh well, let's get started now. The two young men sat at the desk and began their tutoring journey. Lin Xingyi first tested Shen Yang's basics, and found that it was not that he could not learn, but that he had not learned it at all. Fortunately, I am good at integral calculus and can calculate if I can write the formula. From time to time in the room, there were the sounds of books turning, the rustling of pens scratching on paper, and the soft whispers of two young people. Outside the window, the night deepens and the moon rises higher. Just as the two were about to immerse themselves in the atmosphere of study and get into the state, a gentle voice suddenly came from downstairs. Yang, come down to eat. It was Li Huowan's voice, which indeed aroused Chen Yang's appetite. He stood up, walked to the door, and responded loudly. Get down right now. Turning to look at Lin Xingyi, Chen Yang asked reluctantly. Do you want to go downstairs and eat together? Lin Xingyi raised her head, unconsciously revealed a gentle smile, and shook her head gently. No, I've already eaten. She held a red pen in her hand, and was carefully marking on Chen Yang's physics textbook. Then I'll go down first. At the dining table downstairs, Chen Yang's father, Chen Jianjun, had already returned home and was sitting there. Seeing Chen Yang coming down, he said with a hint of reproach. I heard that little girl is here, why don't you invite her to have dinner with you? Chen Yang had expected to be asked this question, so he told the truth. They said they had already eaten. While serving dishes to the table, Li Huan asked curiously, why did that girl come to see you? Chapter 76 Whipping. Chen Yang was stunned, his mind working rapidly, not knowing how to answer. His eyes flickered, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, and he tried his best to make up an excuse. Suddenly, an inspiration came to me. Actually I asked her to be a tutor. Chen Yang followed the fact that Lin Xingyi was indeed helping her review, and said seriously, pretending to be motivated. She has very good grades. I want to improve mine. Although it is a bit unbelievable to hire a tutor in college, Li Huowan and Chen Jianjun exchanged glances, obviously half believing and half doubting their son's words. When Chen Yang brought Lin Xingyi home for the first time, the corners of her eyes were a little red, obviously she had been crying not long ago. The second time you come, you become a tutor? However, seeing Chen Yang's enthusiasm for learning, he did not ask any further questions. While the family of three was having dinner, Lin Xingyi in the room was taking this opportunity to concentrate on preparing lessons for the future. He browsed through the physics book, marking important formulas and concepts. His brows slightly furrowed and his expression serious. He is just like a dedicated and responsible teacher. 1 day to learn, 3 days to master, 7 days to be proficient. Lin Xingyi whispered to herself, I must help Chen Yang pass the makeup exam. I would be lucky if I can pass the makeup exam after all. What else do I need to do if I have to pass the makeup exam? After a while, Chen Yang finished his meal, and shaved briefly before returning to his room upstairs. As for the hair that has already covered the eyebrows and earlobes, there is nothing we can do about it. Let's just leave it this way for now. When going up the stairs, Chen Yang felt a little dizzy. After all, after 2 days and nights of sleep, I didn't feel like myself anymore. Everything in my field of vision seemed a little vague, as if covered with a layer of faint holy light. As soon as he entered the room, Chen Yang saw Lin Xingyi preparing lessons seriously. Before he could speak, Li Huowan followed closely and appeared at the door. She held a thin golden bamboo stick in her hand and had a kind smile on her face. Little girl, Li Huowan looked at Lin Xingyi with a somewhat polite tone. Teaching is hard work. My son may be disobedient sometimes, so you have to be strict with him. Then he handed the bamboo stick to Lin Xingyi and blinked. If he doesn't study hard you can beat him with this. He is in good health and cannot be damaged. Lin Xingyi was stunned. A puzzled expression appeared on her face. She looked at the bamboo sticks, then at Chen Yang, at a loss as to what to do. Chen Yang was speechless, but at least his mother really believed that Lin Xingyi was his tutor. Seeing that the aunt was still making the gesture of handing over something, Lin Xingyi hesitated for a moment, then had to reach out and carefully take the thin, golden bamboo stick. Thank you, auntie, Lin Xingyi said softly, with a barely perceptible tremor in her voice. The white fingers gently stroked the smooth surface of the bamboo strips, feeling the traces left by time. Only then did Li Huowan nod with satisfaction and a kind smile appeared on her face. Please teach our Yang well. After saying that, he turned and left the room. Chen Yang stood aside, looking at the bamboo stick in Lin Xingyi's hand, his eyes slightly widened. The corners of his mouth twitched unconsciously, as if he had seen something terrible. Memories came flooding back like a tide. That bamboo stick was Chen Yang's old friend from his childhood. When he was a child, he was naughty, and was often educated by this bamboo stick. Although most of the time it only served as a deterrent. But occasionally, when he really annoyed his mother, the bamboo stick would fall on his buttocks, neither lightly nor heavily. The worst incident was when little Chen Yang stole money from home. Li Huowan was serious. That time she beat Chen Yang while he was crying. The red marks on his thighs did not disappear for 3 days. You're not really going to use it? Chen Yang's tone of inquiry was a little nervous, and his eyes moved back and forth between Lin Xingyi and the bamboo sticks. Lin Xingyi looked at Chen Yang's unnatural look and couldn't help but smile. He narrowed his eyes slightly, put on a deliberately stern face and said, that depends on your performance. As she spoke, she gently waved the bamboo stick. Call out. The crisp sound of breaking air echoed in the room, as if the air was being split apart. Chen Yang listened to this voice and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This attack actually tore the void apart. Lin Xingyi looked at Chen Yang standing there. Her light laughter was crisp and pleasant, like a wind chime in summer. Come over and continue your review. Lin Xingyi blinked. Time is running out, school starts in 4 days. That means there are only 3 days left before the makeup exam. Chen Yang sat down at his desk and resumed sitting side by side with Lin Xingyi. Bamboo strips have stood the test of time and are still as tough as ever. Lin Xingyi gently bent the bamboo stick, feeling its toughness, and looked at Chen Yang, who was sitting next to her and was much taller than her. I can't bear to hit you. Under the warm yellow light, the golden lines on the surface of the bamboo strips are clearly visible, and the slight patina tells its history. I promise. As long as you pay attention in class, this bamboo stick will be just a decoration. Lin Xingyi gently opened the physics book in her hand and indicated that the tutoring should continue. Well, let's continue with the first chapter. We were almost finishing. Chen Yang nodded, forcing his somewhat confused mind to concentrate after staying up all night. Unconsciously, my eyes began to wander to areas beyond the paper and pen, because studying in this situation was too hypnotic. If you turn your head quietly, you can see the girl next to you. Lin Xingyi's profile looks particularly soft and beautiful. Her long eyelashes cast a faint shadow on her cheeks, and the corners of her mouth are slightly raised when she explains. Okay, the first chapter is relatively simple and has no main points. Chen Yang, are you listening? Lin Xingyi's voice rose a little, waking Chen Yang from his distraction. Huh? Oh, I'm listening. I'm listening. Chen Yang answered in a panic, and hurriedly straightened his wandering eyes. Lin Xingyi sighed lightly, and the slender fingers of her left hand tightly grasped the golden bamboo stick. Snap snap. She tapped the table lightly with a bamboo stick, making a crisp sound. Focus. Lin Xingyi pretended to be stern, but the look in her eyes could not be serious. Otherwise I'll have to help you focus. Chen Yang scratched his head with a wry smile, his tone carrying a hint of fatigue. I'm sorry, Starry. I'll listen carefully. After a while, the attention that Chen Yang had finally gathered was quickly used up. It's not because physics is too difficult, but because I'm too sleepy. Or maybe because the girl next to me is too distracting. When the brain is tired, I will escape and always want to find something to relax. Are you distracted again? Lin Xingyi said softly, with a barely perceptible tenderness in her serious tone. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking. I'm thinking about the topic. Lin Xingyi pursed her lips, sighed softly, and imitated her teacher, looking at Chen Yang with a slightly stern look.